Welcome into Morning JOX, 6 a.m. here on your Thursday morning. Conrad Van Order, Damian Mitchell with you here for the next hour as we get you set for a full day of college football analysis here on JOX 94.5. And I will say, Damian, I like, and I know we're in the middle of this, and we're going to keep going for a while here of, every single day you've got some sort of football to watch.
Yes, sir.
On Tuesday, probably, I'll be honest, I didn't watch UTEP.
You couldn't.
I'm going to be honest.
You couldn't dive into old Texas El Paso.
No. I couldn't, to be completely honest with you. But on Wednesday, a little more interesting than things were on Tuesday. So I think that's a good place to start off. As
Give me liberty or give me death.
Well, they got death last night because Kennesaw State, who I believe is the worst, I think coming in, they were either 133 or 134 in terms of they're the worst FBS team in the country. Going up against an undefeated Liberty team that, we can say what we want about them the last couple of years, but they know how to schedule light.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to schedule easy, and you end up losing to Kennesaw State 27-24. First time Kennesaw State has ever beaten an FBS team ever. Ever.
And what's crazy is, so for Liberty, they were a 27.5 point favorite on the road at Kennesaw. Like, they came in as the big dogs.
They didn't even score 27.
Exactly. Like, Kennesaw State, hang the banner up, baby. Like, this is your crowning moment, man, because one, making the jump from FCS, where they were pretty consistent, they were good in the FCS level, making the jump to the FBS level, and now to have a program-defining win over a team that Liberty just got done playing in the New Year's Six Bowl. Now, granted,
it wasn't pretty, but
yeah, it wasn't. But still, as a group of 5 team to be in that stage, and the team that we're so used to seeing, to have a deflating loss like this, it really does throw a wrench into everything that we think about just this group of 5, man, because Kennesaw State, and again, like, I think Caden Salter, for the people that look at him as like, oh, he could probably be a fringe guy in the Power 5, let this game kind of simmer down and really watch how he played. I'm not going to say he was spectacular, but to me, Kennesaw State should have never really been in this ball game. And the fact that it felt very similar to Vanderbilt and Alabama, where Kennesaw State they were taking it to them. They looked like they were the better team from the beginning of the game to the end. And they end up taking, a 27-24 victory over Liberty. But if you're Jamie Chadwell, this is not what you signed up for right here. Like, this is one of those, like you said, the schedule kind of lines up for you that, okay, Liberty should be one of those teams that we're discussing at the end of the year that could get that group of 5 spot in the playoffs. Well, this loss ain't going to help you not a single bit. Like, you probably slashed your real legitimate chance of being that group of 5 squad to potentially be in the college football playoff.
Oh, yeah. They're done for now. This is probably, granted, just based on the opponent, this is the worst loss in college football this year, technically, based on who you lost to. Like, this is, again, I understand the circumstances, and like for people here, this isn't going to relate, but this is significantly worse than Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, just in the context of how bad Kennesaw State is, or was at least going into the game. And, if you're Liberty, you gain more yardage during the course of the game. The time of possession slightly leaned in Kennesaw State's favor, but it's not, it's not like you look at the score sheet or the box score and you go, oh, wow, Liberty had 4 turnovers, things where you could say, oh, well, this thing got sideways. No, it was just straight up, like pound for pound. They went back and forth. And honestly, Liberty scored with 2 minutes left in the game, something like that. And it was 27-17 with about 2 minutes left. Right. And so it looks a little bit better, but this wasn't a situation where, they were, going on a last-minute drive and threw a pick or something like it. No, it was pretty much set in stone, and all the way through, Kennesaw State was there. So that's incredibly impressive, super big, awesome moment for them, huge win. Might be the only one you get this year, but if it is,
It's a big one.
that's a good one. That's not a bad one to get right there.
Absolutely. We also had some more action on Wednesday night football here in the state of Alabama as Jacksonville State knocks off Middle Tennessee State University. The Jacksonville State goes to 4-3 on the season, 3-0 in Conference USA. And that game, you could tell in the second half that Jacksonville State really locked in. They started to they kind of toyed with Middle Tennessee State, and it started to feel, especially when they got that run game started to really lock in. I mean, when you look at what Stewart was able to do, over 200 yards rushing, Jacksonville State, the past 2 seasons, they've kind of made their living on playing these weekday games, and it doesn't really feel like they're sneaking up on anybody anymore. This is a pretty good football team. Now, granted, they don't really, do well when they bat the jump up or anything, but as far as running Conference USA and what they've been able to do, they look good. And it feels like I only watch them on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, but every time I watch them, I'm like, oh, okay, Rich Rod knows what he's doing. But I think for Derek Mason, because I really do like Derek Mason as a coach. Middle Tennessee State, they're long gone are the Rick Stockstill days where, it's the air raid, they're throwing all over the place, but they have a few pieces on that team that you're like, okay, like they can work some things. So you got Omari Kelly, former Auburn Tiger, and also Hewitt Trussville native. Jacksonville State has taken full advantage of these weekday games of really showing people who they are. And I think that's what their identity has been. Like, I would be shocked if they're not in the bowl game this year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I certainly think they're headed in that direction. I mean, they're undefeated in their conference right now. So, the way that things keep going there, I mean, you might be playing in a conference championship game, but no, I mean, the job that they've done the last 2 years, or I guess year and a half, since jumping up to the FBS has been really, really impressive. And yeah, I mean, like you said, MTSU is just, it's not the same as it was in the past. There's some growing pains there, obviously, but like you said, I mean, Amari Kelly, 128 receiving yards. We'll see where he is at the end of the week. But I know going into the game, he was, I think, number 12 in the country in receiving yards. So yeah, I mean, very, very impressive. But they just got to get more dudes up there. But I mean, also, JSU ran for 440 yards. So
yeah, 577 total yards.
They averaged 8 yards a carry.
See, listen,
over 8 yards a carry.
It's crazy to think that Rich Rod has been in the game for so long, and he's kind of been looked at as one of these offensive guys that's had success, and he's still keeping the old school feel of triple option. If he's got a running back, he's not afraid to hand him the ball more than 20 times a game. Looking at you, Hugh Freeze. He's not afraid to believe in the guys that he has in the backfield. And he's like, hey, we ain't got to get cute. We ain't got to get fancy. Let's read this thing, pitch it out if we got a chance. If we got somebody straight up, let's hand it off inside zone, outside zone. We ain't got no reason to sugarcoat it to make it, something that is not. But Jacksonville State ends up having an explosive offensive day. Again, 577 total yards of offense. And Conrad, we had this discussion on Mac and Cube yesterday, and Cole brought it up. It's who has been the most disappointing team? And we talked about the worst team in the SEC. I said it was Mississippi State. John and Cole said it was Auburn. And I get where the only thing with Mississippi State that I would say is they're getting better, but they're still so far away from like the consistency part where I truly believe they can pull off an upset. That's why I went with Mississippi State. And their argument for Auburn was they're not getting better week in and week out. When you're finding more ways to lose ball games, it kind of just puts you in this mode of, if they haven't done it yet, why should we believe they do it on Saturday against Kentucky? And that's kind of where I feel like I have this gut feeling that Auburn's going to do it, but I don't feel confident in it because of the fact that they play almost exactly how you needed them to against Missouri. And then late in the game where it's like, hey, man, you got it gift wrap. You have it right there for the taking. They still end up losing the ball game in regulation.
So it's just who I think the most disappointing team has been overall this year. I mean, I wouldn't put Mississippi State in there for me just because they're honestly better than I was expecting them to be, or they're more competitive than I was expecting them to be. Just going and seeing, being able to go and make it a 10-point game against Georgia, being able
Yeah.
to go and, in the first half have it close against Texas. And I know, again, we're not in the business of moral victories, but I you knew it was going to be rough, especially with the different teams coming in and changing the schedules, and it was just going to be bad for Mississippi State. But the fact that they've actually been able to go out there and okay, they're putting up a good fight. Like, I've been pretty impressed by that personally. Auburn would be, I think you could put Auburn would probably be my pick for the most disappointing, just because instead of them being 2-5 right now, I really thought they would be 5-2. And I mean, maybe you're 6-1 if, because that Missouri game probably looks different if this is a different Auburn team.
Mm-hmm.
The Georgia game, I think that one was, you were just outmatched in that one. It is what it is. But I mean, every other game is, and I mean, Hugh Freeze said this yesterday in the teleconference, and, there's a part of me that's like, all right, you can't keep making excuses and saying these things. But I mean, he is true or right when he said, well, outside of the Georgia game, we really should have won all of the game, or we could have won. And it's, well, you did play the games and lose them, but I get what you're in the sense of, 2 or 3 different plays here, you win a lot of those football games. But just for them to be 2-5 and to continue to find different ways to lose football games. It's when one thing looks better, another thing looks worse. And it's just, especially if you lose to Kentucky this weekend, because then I don't think people are going to have a ton of confidence that you're going to turn around against Vanderbilt just because of how good they've looked at for most of the year. And it's, yeah, I mean, I think it has to be Auburn because a lot of us thought, I mean, I thought worst case scenario, they were going to be 7-5. Like, a bad year, they were going to go 7-5, and there were going to be a lot of questions and things that people were unhappy with. So the fact that you're now 2-5, and I just don't see a bowl game in your future personally. Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be Auburn. But if you want to look at it from the standpoint of, teams that we thought could win a national championship or compete for a national championship, and now we're not so sure, like, I mean, I think you can make arguments for Ole Miss. I think you can make an argument for Alabama right now.
Yeah.
But I just think for Auburn in the sense of, Alabama and Ole Miss are still having maybe not by their expectations good years, but they're 5-2, right? Like, they're still both going to probably win 9 games at least. But Auburn's in a position where I'm going to be shocked if they win 6 games. So I feel like that's kind of the direction we have to go.
Yeah, and I was talking to some Auburn fans yesterday, a couple of my buddies, and I was just like, man, just shoot it to me straight. How are you feeling about this game with Kentucky? And they both were like, man, it's hard to know that we have this much talent across the board and you still underachieve. And they felt the frustration of, all right, Hugh Freeze, especially with his comments about, being stressed out and, the play calling and things like that. But it's like, that's what we hired you for. We wanted you to fix this offense. We wanted the offense to be almost back to where it was when Gus Malzahn had the Nick Marshalls, the Cam Newtons, and it wasn't the issue of questioning were they going to be able to score points. You haven't scored more than 28 since New Mexico. And it's kind of just puzzling to see how, one, I understand you got a lot of youth and inexperience at the receiver position, but the offensive line hasn't been consistent. Auburn is just in an identity crisis. And it feels like, oh, well, this could be the week they get it done. They can get it right. They don't. And I was like, okay, I'm looking at Kentucky as ever since Ole Miss win, they've gone down. Like, they haven't looked the same since that. So if this is your quote unquote get right game, this may be the only one you get from this point forward. Because I'm not going to sit here and say that I think Louisiana Monroe, I do love what Brian Vincent has done down there, but it's no guarantee that you win that ball game. And it's crazy that we're having this conversation because we thought we let the New Mexico State game last year of, that was last year. That was Diego Pavia, Jerry Kill. Like, they done something right, but you don't even feel confident that they can beat a Vanderbilt, a Texas A&M, or an Alabama. It's okay. How bad can it get? And you're staring down the barrel of not winning a conference game with better talent that you had last year and a worse record. Like, it's hard for me to process that because how can you say you're trending upward, but your record shows that you're getting worse? Like, and it's not even just a gradual decline. It's no, you're staring down the barrel of not winning a single conference game in the 12-team playoff era where it's, I mean, I just find it frustrating for Auburn fans as well. It's like, man, I understand where you're coming from as far as not having confidence in this squad because you haven't seen it happen yet. So why can't it happen this weekend? And it's, I mean, everybody's like, man, the Kentucky's defensive line. I know Florida was able to, pretty much pick their poison of what they wanted to do successfully on the offensive side. I'm like, Auburn can do that. Why don't you believe it can happen Saturday?
Yeah, I would just if that Kentucky defense is on, it's just going to be very, very difficult for Auburn, I think, because they are going to be able to make Peyton Thorne very uncomfortable. They're good. They're good at stopping the run. Like it is going to be a difficult game, especially going on the road. Just adding to it, and I I I don't understand. Like I mean, I'm with you. I don't think you can just have unless you are just blindly confident because you are a fan of Auburn and you think that they're going to magically turn it around, and that's part of being a fan. You can believe that. It's just they haven't given us any evidence to expect that because again, like we knew like and it's going to be a close game, right? Like we know it's probably going to be very close and it's going to be competitive. It's just ultimately, are you going to make one too many mistakes? Is
Mm-hmm.
that really kind of where it feels like we're at with Auburn at this point? Is it's just you can get so close to the finish line and then you end up tripping and falling at some point along the way. And yeah, I don't know where it just feels like for so long now, even going back to Brian Harsin, and it's just like next year, next year, next year. It's just this revolving door of expectations and the goalpost continuously being moved a year in the future of okay, well, we're not there yet, but again, I'm telling you, next year that's going to be the year. 2025, that's going to be the year. That's what we've been hearing for a while now. So it better be the year because you can't do this again. You can't
No.
have better talent. You can't be a better football team on paper and have so many just mental errors, fundamental errors, just bad decision making. You can't let those things continue to plague your football team. And I know you're stuck with the guys that you have right now, but it, you can't keep getting in this cycle of we're just a year away, we're just a year away. Eventually it has to be that year. Eventually
Right.
that time has to arrive, and all we heard was, we got to build up the roster, build up the roster. And I understand one recruiting class, 1.5, whatever, because he had kind of a late start last year. That's not going to completely overhaul things. I understand that. But we can all look at their roster and look at certain position groups and go, you are significantly better in these areas. Why has that not resulted in better, more wins in the win column?
Yep.
So, I believe it or not, Auburn fans, I feel for you.
That's a lot. That's saying a lot, brother. Saying a lot. I didn't think you had it in you.
No, but I'd be pissed if I was an Auburn fan. I'll just be honest.
Hey, they say it's one day closer to basketball season, but we shall see. We'll take a look at some games this weekend. That Alabama line has moved. Why has it moved in favor of the Crimson Tide? We'll discuss that more when we return here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. 623 here on Morning JOX. JOX 94.5, Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, and of course you as well, 205-834-9450. Your texts, your calls are welcome anytime here on Morning JOX. And we've got a little bit of a line change in the Alabama-Missouri matchup coming up at 2:30. They're in Tuscaloosa, Bryant-Denny Stadium. Game opened up at 13.5 for Alabama. You woke up this morning, checked that line a little bit. Now it's up to 16.5. After one, we did find out that Nate Noel will not be playing for the Missouri Tigers, the running back who's averaging, I think, almost 6 yards a carry. Their leading rusher for the team. But now we're hearing reports that quarterback Brady Cook has been listed as doubtful in this ball game for Alabama. And if you watch Drew Pine when he played,
He was really bad.
he's not that good. And
Something about those former Notre Dame quarterbacks, you know?
You said it, not me. But you're not wrong. And yeah, if Brady Cook doesn't play for Missouri, I don't see how that game could possibly go in Missouri's favor, especially with the Drew Pine that played Saturday against Auburn.
Yeah.
If he shows up, that's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the benefit if you're Missouri and, I guess depending on how long you've known that Brady Cook might not be able to go this weekend, probably gotten some more snaps in practice this week. And so that helps you out a little bit maybe if you're Drew Pine. But, I mean, he was not good last week. He was 10 of 21 for 78 yards. He averaged under 4 yards an attempt against Auburn last week.
That's DJU numbers.
Yeah, that's really, really bad. I will say, though, in terms of Noel being out, I thought Marcus Carroll was pretty good last week when he came in. For him, he had 40 yards and a touchdown after Noel got hurt last week against Auburn. So, they got a little juice there still in the backfield with the guys behind Noel. But, yeah, I mean, that's just a tough loss at the quarterback spot because, I mean, you saw Brady Cook at, 70%, whatever he was when he came back into that game. Like, it was just a different feel for Missouri. And I know they still haven't looked like they have last year, but you can tell how much he means to that offense. Mm-hmm. And if they are going to have a hope, he is an integral part of that. So, yeah, that's a tough one for Missouri. We'll see how it progresses over the next couple of days. But, just based on him getting hurt last week, having to go to the hospital, all these different things, like it definitely doesn't look like he's going to be available or at the very least at 100% this weekend in Tuscaloosa. So certainly no excuses if you're Alabama, though.
None.
None. Yeah. You got to handle your business.
Exactly. And I think that's what this weekend is for Alabama because, the Tennessee lost. And here's the thing. Coming into the season, and if we would have told you that Alabama was going to lose 2 ball games by, the month of October, you're like, okay, maybe Georgia slips up and gets them, or, Kirby finally gets the monkey off his back. And Tennessee probably, if they do what they're supposed to do, you can understand, all right, those 2 losses happen. But you're 5-2, and the world isn't crumbling down. It's just the fact that you haven't shown the necessary improvements week in and week out. Each week, it's like a new problem that's starting to present itself. And you've been able to overcome it because, one, you're talented in a lot of areas. And it's like if you truly go back, and this feels like it's been forever ago, and watch that first half of Alabama, if that is the peak in which they can play, it's hard not to see that this Alabama team is still one of the better teams in college football. It's just they haven't played like that since then. Maybe it's the playing down to your opponents, playing up to certain opponents. Maybe that second half of Georgia, that Georgia really just locked in and was like, all right, no, this is who we are. We need to play like it. And you could kind of say they've started to hit the increase button, whereas Alabama started to decrease since the second half of that game. Like since halftime of that game, you haven't really felt confident about what Alabama's been able to do. And then you go watch the South Carolina tape, and then you watch what happened in Tennessee. It's, okay, these problems weren't just a one-off thing in the second half of Georgia. No, Georgia exposed it, and now it's, this is where we're struggling at. We're not making tackles. We're not even hustling to the ball in certain areas. We're playing to our competition. And it almost feels like they're playing not to lose in certain situations. It's like, all right, we're Alabama. We're supposed to do what we're supposed to do. But you've lost that edge. Like, it just doesn't feel like Alabama. Maybe this weekend is going to be that changing of the guard where it's like, all right, let's lock in and prove to people that we are still one of the best teams in college football and just go out there and execute. And I think that's where the issues lie with Alabama. It's now you have a Missouri team who's going to come in wounded. They won the ball game, but it really feels like they lost after, what happened to Drew. I almost said Drew Lock, but Brady Cook. And now that he's kind of leaning towards not playing, this is the golden opportunity to really just flex your muscles. Like, all right, get right. Like, this is the true definition of a get right game, because if Missouri even keeps it close, we're going to have real conversations about Alabama moving forward of just where do we see this team being at the end of the season.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think a lot of it comes down to, what does Jalen Milroe look like on Saturday? Because, I mean, again, if he looks like he did against Tennessee, whether it's first off, I will just say this: you cannot tell me that guy is not injured to some degree. And I'm not saying that as an excuse for him, but I'm just saying, like, and I know that, DeBoer was asked about early in the week, is like, well, everybody's banged up at this point in the season, but you cannot tell me there's not something that is probably impacting his ability to go out, because he just does not look the same. And I know some of it is decision making and processing and things like that, but you don't miss as many throws as he did last week without there being something wrong, in my opinion. And maybe it was just something mechanically wrong. I know a lot of people have talked about his footwork and how that needs to get better, and especially against Tennessee, it was really bad. But this is this is the get back on the horse opportunity, and everything we've heard out of Alabama this week around their practices and things has been good. It's the stuff you want to hear, but then you also, I think it raises some questions of, well, why was this not always the case? Did it take 2 losses for maybe some people to start to turn the corner and understand, like, okay, I really have to apply myself if we want to be successful and we really want to go out there and have a chance to compete for a spot in the college football playoff? Because, when you hear things like earlier in the week, hearing about, they're re-emphasizing the small details and showing up to meetings on time and going to class and doing little things, tucking in their shirts and all this stuff. And okay, that's great, but are you telling me that stuff? Are you just telling me that now? Or are you telling me that in the sense that stuff wasn't happening until now? That's where it's like, I mean, if you've got guys that are not showing up on time for meetings and practice and like the most basic things that you need to do, that is concerning. And I think that, you hold that to the coaching and, okay, you're maybe not holding these guys accountable as much as they should. Granted, I know Kalen DeBoer said last night on Hey Coach that, depending on when you hear things, just because you heard something now doesn't mean it hasn't been going on all along and whatnot. But there certainly seems to be a bigger emphasis on the fundamental things and getting the little things right and translating things you do in your day-to-day life to having success on the football field. And all of that is good, but you also can go, well, I mean, we're over halfway through the year now. Like, should this not have maybe been the case earlier on in the year? But, we got to hear from some coaches yesterday. I know Jamarcus Shepard was very vocal about Tyler Booker and how he's been kind of the guy in the locker room this week, getting on people's ass and reminding them that this is not good enough. This is not acceptable. Things need to change. And so we'll see on Saturday if things have changed.
Yeah, we shall indeed. I know one thing has changed. That line has moved from 13.5 to 16.5. And if Drew Pine is out there, I can understand why that line has moved in favor for the Alabama Crimson Tide. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. Hear from you, 205-834-9450. Your text messages, your calls when we return here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. 6:37 here on Morning JOX. JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, and you as well. Discuss a little bit of Auburn just being disappointing so far this season. Alabama, is this a get right game this weekend with Missouri? Now that line has moved since Brady Cook, quarterback for the Missouri Tigers, has been listed as doubtful for the game, and they're already going to miss Nate Noel. Want to hear from you. 205-834-9450. Alan texted in. He says, do you think this Alabama coaching staff is finding out what it means to have a serious fan base, asking questions and pushing a standard? I guess in a way, but I don't necessarily think that affects it because I don't know. I really do think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. Of course, it was going to be an adjustment for anybody that came in behind Nick Saban anyway. But I think that I just think that because it's so different from what we're used to in the past 17 years, it's just an adjustment for everybody. And some people just, one, we're not as patient, just as in society, we're not as patient as we have been in years past where you realize Alabama's only 5-2. It's not like they're fighting for 500. It's they haven't been as dominant in the wins, and the two losses that you have, you technically just outplay. You just got outplayed. And I think it's hard to really process an Alabama team getting outplayed because we had seen it in very few moments when Nick Saban was there. But you realize, and we can go back, it was ancient history at this point because the game has changed so much, but in year one of Nick Saban, like they barely won 6 games. Like that, they were just trying to get there. And you want to talk about what he was playing with Shula's guys and things like that. You had to build it up. I get that. But then I flip that over to the Auburn side of things, and people still trying to say, well, the first year he had Harson's players, but with the transfer portal, you can literally rinse and repeat a team year in and year out because Deion did it when he first went to Colorado. Literally, he changed the entire roster. He went from 1 win to 4. That's an improvement. Where I don't necessarily think I wouldn't say it's an excuse to say that, he was playing with, the old coaching staff guys because you have the power as soon as you get in there to literally gut the roster if you want to. It's just, will you do it? So I think that he's kind of in that situation, whereas Kalen DeBoer, he walked into something that was, one, bigger than what he had at Washington, but he also he has to implement his version of the standard at Alabama because it was set so high under the tutelage of Nick Saban.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the team is worth criticizing. I think they deserve it because they have not lived up to the expectations. Because, again, regardless of, everything you just went into, that team is more talented than the performances we've got from them on the football field. And that frustration is fair, in my opinion. But it doesn't mean that Kalen DeBoer is a bad coach, right? Just because Alabama's 5-2 right now. Again, I mean, you look at just what the schedule is and what this team looks like, and I know the popular sentiment is, oh, well, these problems wouldn't be around if Nick Saban was there. A lot of these issues were still around. This team was still getting penalized. They were still making mental errors. They were still not as disciplined as they had been in the past. You would still have problems with Jalen Milroe and his development. Like, these aren't things that would just magically not exist. So I think we get so wrapped up in, well, he doesn't do things the way that Nick Saban did. And I wish that, we did things the old way. And if we did, we'd be more successful. And it's no, I think this is just where this team is. And that doesn't mean it's not frustrating. It doesn't mean it's not hard to watch at times, but it also doesn't mean that you need to fire the coach and, everything's,
right.
It is what it is. And again, this is a team that if they want to improve and they truly dedicate themselves to improving on a week by week basis, they are still going to have an opportunity to play in the college football playoff and have an opportunity to achieve the goals that they had for themselves at the beginning of the season. Is it super likely right now? I wouldn't say so, but it's possible. And I just, you got to give the guy time. You got to give him time to figure things out. you can say if you want, well, maybe the coordinators are in over their heads. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I think everything is on the table, and it's fair to have criticisms. It's fair to have complaints about the team. But again, like, it's going to be okay. Like, it's going to be fine. Alabama's not going to go 6-6. Alabama's not going. It's going to be okay.
Right. Like, we'll look at this situation next year and kind of laugh at it. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe we thought the sky was falling at this point in time. But like you said, it just takes time. Patrick texts in, he says, Jalen Milroe does look the same. He was frustrating to watch in his one start in 2022, all of 2023, and all of 2024. He is not a consistent pocket passer. He definitely can't throw accurately once he leaves the pocket. The only bright spot in the offensive line is 72 and 52. Lastly, DeBoer has way too much trust in Milroe as a passer. Needs to rely on a run back downhill running back game more. Now, I hear you. I understand where your frustration is, but I want you to go back and watch from Texas A&M last year and the rest of 2023 for Jalen Milroe. Now, I will say he has regressed in some areas. Like, he feels like he's doing more hero ball than he is just playing quarterback. But 2023, for the middle part of October all the way through November, there wasn't a quarterback better than Jalen Milroe.
He was the best player in college football the last month of the season, probably.
Right. Yeah. And it was head and shoulders above everybody else. Now, I do think he has regressed in some areas this year. And again, he's in a new system. He's with new guys. Everything is new. Now, I do agree with you on the fact that you got Jam and Justice in the backfield. I would probably make a point this week of circling their numbers and their jerseys and be like, hey, big dog, I hope y'all ready, because we need y'all. We are going to need you on this backstretch to take some of the pressure off the quarterback. And I do agree with you on that point. So it's just growing pains, y'all. And again, you're 5-2 with these conversations. Imagine being Auburn right now, 2-5, with a better roster and still looking bad. So you kind of it could be worse. I'll put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue on the phone lines. Let's go to our buddy Scotty, who wants to talk some Alabama football with us this morning. What's going on, Scotty?
Yeah, man. Y'all said something about the running backs doing their job. Before that can happen, the offensive line's got to block.
Yeah, for sure.
And, y'all do a great job, guys. I love listening to y'all every morning.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
But, yeah, all we can do is just keep our head down and try to win one game at a time, and that's all we can do.
That's it, man.
Guys.
Roll Tide, brother.
It's just about identifying an area where you can get better every single week. And it doesn't mean that you're going to take the jump from being, it doesn't mean like last week you had 15 penalties, this week you have 0 penalty, right? Like, that's not realistic, but it's, can you show improvements? Can you be a little more disciplined week after week? Can you have a little bit better mastery of what your role is in the offense, in the defense, on special teams, whatever it may be? It's just, it really, like, it sounds simple, and I know it sounds easier than it is in reality, but it really does just come down to, in a lot of ways, doing the small things correctly, doing the fundamental things correctly, because that's such a big part of, not only football, but every team sport, is not only you being in position and having the confidence to know what you need to do, but it's having the confidence that the guy to your left, the guy to your right, the guy in front of you, the guy behind you, they also know what to do. And having that confidence in your teammates allows you to play more loose, because you're not playing with the sense of, oh, well, if this guy misses his assignment, we're screwed, or, I'm going to have to cover for him. You have the confidence that my guy's going to handle his business, so I can handle my business over here, and we're going to be good.
Boom.
And that is such a key part to football. And I feel like that's something that you just don't really have right now, because we've seen the communication issues, and part of it is you do have young guys out there that are going to make mistakes, and I think they're aware of that. It's just trying to get closer to that point where everybody is on the same page at all times, because when that happens, good things start to happen. Because there are times where you watch this team and they do good things. There are good plays that happen. You just can't have a good play. It's like every time they take a step forward, they take 2 steps back afterwards. And those are the things that you can't have that.
Absolutely. We sense the frustration, but like Conrad said, everything's going to be okay, y'all. Everything's going to be all right. We'll continue with your conversations on the other side, your text messages, your calls. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. Welcome back into Morning JOX. JOX 94.5, Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order here with you for a few more moments as we get you set for McElroy and Kubelik in the morning, coming up at the top of the hour. Of course, your text messages, your calls are always welcome. 205-834-9450. Somebody texted in and says, Jalen Milroe stunk the last month of the season last year. He was straight garbage against Auburn. Hold on. All right. November. I'm just going to go just for the month of November for Jalen Milroe. In a 42-28 win over number 14 ranked LSU, he's 15 for 23, 219 yards on the air, 20 rushes for 155 and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Kentucky, 15 of 22, 234, 3 touchdowns. He also had 3 touchdowns rushing, 8 carries for 36 yards. So 6 touchdowns in the game. That's awful football. Against UT Chattanooga, where he didn't have to do much, 13 for 16, 197, 3 touchdowns. And against Auburn, 16 for 24, 259 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then had 18 carries and 107 yards. If that's horrible football, then I need to check my fantasy football team, because if he've had those stats, I'm winning a couple games.
Yes, okay, yes. Granted, fantasy is not the best indicator of how good you are actually playing in a game. It's more of a how many opportunities do you have? But no, I mean, I think you bring up a good point, and for whatever reason, people have just never liked Jalen Milroe. Like, there's just a portion of the Alabama fan base that has always thought he's been terrible. And while I understand his lows can be pretty low, did you like making the playoff last year? Did you like winning the SEC title over Georgia? Because you're not doing those things without Jalen Milroe.
You don't say.
You're not doing those. And as frustrating as he's been to watch the last couple of weeks, like, he was good. Going back to the Vanderbilt game first, like, he was very good in that game. I understand you had some turnovers. Granted, they're more of a good play by a DB or a weird pass deflection off a helmet bounces up and, someone's able to bring it in for a pick. I understand the frustrations that people have with him, but I think we also forget, okay, I get it. He's not Tua. He's not Bryce Young. He's not that level. Okay. Most people aren't.
Right.
This might be a hot take. I think he's better than Jalen Hurts ever was at Alabama.
I don't think it's a hot take.
I think he's better than Blake Sims was at Alabama. I think he's better. I don't know if I would say he's better than. He's obviously more dynamic than someone like Coker. I know Coker won a national championship, but I think he would look at the two players and go, Jalen Milroe is probably a better player. He's more talented. But you also look at the people around them, right? Like, a lot of those teams, those were good quarterbacks, but they had elite talent around them. And you still have some elite talent around you, but you don't have the depth you used to. You don't have the receivers that those guys had. A lot of times you don't have a Derrick Henry. I understand the frustrations. I understand the thought that there is a better option at quarterback. I really don't think there is, because I think you would have seen it.
Yep. And going back to our Auburn conversation, somebody texts in and says, Hugh Freeze was supposed to be the quarterback guru and had all them quarterbacks in the portal and that he could have gone after. And he said, we got our quarterback. We ain't going after one. If we want to come back and then say we're not paying for one, we got Peyton Thorne. So what Freeze brings is on himself. I agree 100%. I said it me and you both sat up here last year and was like, these guys are hitting the portal. You may want to just hit them with a text message like, what you doing, big head? Like, at least read it and say, like, hey, make your decision. If you want to come down here, got an opportunity to play. And then now you're looking at it and this is what we're left with. So I don't get it, man. Who would have thought that we would have been having a conversation here in 2024 that the quarterback position in the state of Alabama is in just complete disarray? One of them is 2-5 and the other one's in 5-2 team. It's like, wait a minute. Let's just breathe a little bit, y'all. The sky isn't falling. Let's get some positive energy, man. We got big games this weekend. Auburn get right against Kentucky. Alabama get right against Mizzou. Macaroni Cube Look in the morning. They're next.